Hello and welcome to the fifth out of six BFM Lancaster University Students' Union full-time officer debates. We are at the big one. It is the Lancaster University Students' Union presidential debate. I am your host Alex George, head of news here at BFM. I'm joined by our three wonderful presidential candidates who are Siri Hamper, Josh Wolfe and Rhiannon Jones. So guys, how are we all first of all? That's not a drilling question. You can ask us however you want.
Yeah,
everyone's good?
Doing good.
Okay.
Excited for campaigning.
Excited,
starting
tomorrow, yeah, now it's square. So, before we get going on the meat of the debate, so to speak, if you'd like to each take a minute, 2 minutes to introduce yourselves and give yourself, to give an account of what's the main points of your manifesto. So we'll go around in this order, makes sense. We'll start with Siri.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Siri. I'm a third year student, and basically my manifesto is all about running on fairness, representation, change and transparency, and I've got points listed for each of them. Mainly for fairness, it's about cost of living. It's not really fair that the cost of living has increased while the quality of living has decreased. Representation, the fact that I'm a woman of colour means a lot to me, and I'm really running on that and hoping to bring those issues to a high level. Change, I've mentioned, one thing I'm really passionate about is improving our mental health services, and that's something I really want to bring forward if elected as president. And transparency, just about changing the culture of the union in general and making it a more approachable and open space.
Great, thank you very much. Josh.
So, hi, I'm Josh. I'm the current union president, and so it kind of puts, normally it would be a very unique situation, but basically I am currently in the role, and just the four main things I've been working on. I'll see if I can remember all four now, because I haven't got them written down anyway. Four big achievements of the year. The first one is actually something that I announced here on Bellrig a couple of weeks ago, and that's that the spine works have actually been reduced by 6 months. So we've managed to get the completion date moved from December to, I believe it's now looking at end of July to beginning of August, by removing things that didn't matter, that weren't going to affect how students would be able to get around the spine, and actually just wanted to get it done. So that was something I'm really, really proud of. Managed to secure £200,000 from the university. It's been put into a fund, and an external organisation have been pulled in to review and fix all of the accessibility issues around our campus, because there's so many issues with students with disabilities who aren't able to get to their lectures properly. Hopefully everyone has seen the, there's a meme created about it, the Sugar House result that we managed to get. There was a developer looking to build a development that was going to create a lot of risk for the nightclub because of soundproofing and that kind of thing, and we worked really well with a lot of external stakeholders. We got councillors to come and speak and defend our position. We had the university on side, that kind of thing. We managed to overturn the recommendation by the planning officer, 11 votes to nil, which I'm yet again really proud of. And my final one is basically the pop-up union, getting all the officers out there, getting them really, really accountable to the students, so you can come up and ask them anything you want, but also we're talking about the campaigns, the big issues that really matter. Really quickly, my big things for next year, if I'm elected, are around scrutiny, because I've said we're getting out there, we're talking to people, but giving more opportunity for students to really openly ask us questions as full-time officers, and hold us to account for what we're doing, what we're going to be doing, that kind of thing. I'm now going to have to look at my bit of paper. There's work around mental health, because there's the amazing work being done by Laura, our current VP Cams and Comms, with the Grow Our Minds campaign, but actually taking that harder to the university and really, really pushing them to make sure that they're supporting our students' mental health. And the final one, it's already been said, but it's cost of living. It's becoming more and more expensive to be a student, and actually what are we getting out of that? So really fighting against increases to costs wherever possible, and making sure that if the prices are going up, that the quality is as well. Really campaigning, getting students' voices heard on that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Josh. And finally, Rhiannon.
Hi, so I'm Rhiannon. I'm a third year biomedical scientist. I have also been president of the union before, so we have two presidents before, which is a very strange occurrence. I fully appreciate. So I'll also summate some of the achievements that I had during my time in office, and it's also both a mixture of myself as an individual and also as a team, because at the end of the day, being president, you are the team leader, and it's about acknowledging that as a team leader, you'll create the biggest impact with your team rather than just as an individual. So during my time in office, we had the Higher Education and Research Bill, also things like the TEF that you may have heard of, which is the Teaching Excellence Framework. We worked and we lobbied Lords so that we were actually cited in the House of Lords for our contributions for all the work that we did, and we also created a policy document that was given to the parliamentary MP as well. We had done a lot of work as well on the snap general election, because there was a lot going on politically that year, and because of all the work that we did, and also I'd say a lot of the work that also on-campus societies did, especially the political ones, with trying to build awareness, we had the best general election turnout since 1997, especially with some of the controversies, things like Brexit as well. So on my first day of office, Brexit was announced. So from then on, it was kind of trying to get that political pathway clear and trying to get students more involved in politics as well, and realising what impact they can have as well. And they had the best turnout since 1987, so that speaks for itself. I also brought forward this thing called academic peer mentoring. It's where people, when they come into university in their first year, they are mentored by someone that's in a more experienced or higher year, so second or third year, comes in and mentors them. So this is being now trialled in various faculties. It's being trialled in all faculties, and one of my department as well is one that's trialling it, so it was really cute sitting in my third year lecture, seeing it advertised. So they were getting it, I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it's also to build skills for the mentors, but also to support students coming into university and trying to understand how different life is compared to sitting your A-levels or BTECs or everything like that. And also accommodation bundling, so I managed to keep the on-campus accommodation cost of some of the rents below 100 for this academic year. I've also introduced this thing called accommodation bundling, which is going live next year, and it's basically a concept where when you're choosing your rents on campus, you can also optionally add on things like gym membership, printing, laundry, and things like that, and some of them will come actually discounted, so it's optional, and because you choose it at that point, it comes out with your rent, so that means it's kind of taking the pressure of having to budget. So it's making it sure that you actually have enough money to do all your laundry, do all the essentials that you need to, instead of having to worry about whether you can afford it all. So the 5 areas that I'm working on, if I were to be elected, would be welfare and community, academic extracurricular and employability, cost of living, postgraduates, and governance and transparency. I'd say there's quite a few themes that run through all of our manifesto pledges, and I think that just shows the importance of how much it does impact students. So for example, with welfare, 35% of students at Lancaster have struggled with mental health issues, so I'd like to put pressure on the university to better support the vital counselling services by using evidence. You've got to speak in the languages that university speaks. They want statistics, they want things backed up, and you have to prove your case, so I'd be ensuring that we've got the case together and pointing it through to the management. There's also I'd like to improve the signposting of the welfare services, because we have the colleges, the university, the union. People kind of been pinballed between all of these different identities, and they're not actually having the help that they need. So that's the welfare side of things. With academic extracurricular and employability, 53% of students' main motivations for going to university is their career. So we need to do more on actually getting them more employability skills, but also more opportunities to meet with the big companies. So with careers fairs, for example, there's not much diversity. It's always just big people like KPMGs or accounting firms, where it mostly helps management schools. Whereas I'd like to collaborate with the careers fair, careers to diversify the types of events and promote their work as well, so that we could do more, like for example STEM subject ones, where you could go into potentially medical research, or you have type of local ones that are around as well. There's a lot in Manchester where we could actually bring things for STEM subjects, and others like the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences as well. I would like to work towards moving deadlines to ensure that no assignment is due before the previous assignment feedback is received. So currently there's a 4-week policy, but by then I've probably handed in 2 pieces of coursework without having feedback on my first piece. And how am I meant to improve at the end of the day without that all important feedback? So I'd like to have that back. When it comes to
study spaces. We are short on study spaces on campus. So I'd like to lobby the university to enable students to study in seminar rooms after 6 o'clock, so that we could trial it, see if students are, like, basically if they behave, because they used to be able to do it, but they kind of stopped it because people were leaving messes and it annoyed the porters. So I'd like us to trial that again, give people more of an opportunity to have that study space outside of the academic time. And I'd also like to get more flexible gym memberships as well, because the gold, silver and bronze and platinum doesn't quite work. You know, we all don't want all those services. It needs to be more of a pick and choose, because at the end of the day the lifestyle of a student is very much pick and choose, so we should have that. I'd like to provide, in the cost of living section, I'd like to provide advice and budgeting tips on ways to save money, so like budgeting tips of the week and things like that. I'd also like to make sure that we provide clear and accessible breakdowns of any and all additional costs associated with studying, as usually we're just told our tuition fees, we're told our maintenance loans, and that's it. But we don't get told, like, printing, what college membership, things like that, which come at a surprise. And also I'd like to represent postgraduates better. 56 to 60% of postgraduates say that they have never used the Students' Union. That is disgraceful. We need to endeavour to adapt the union to fulfil the postgraduate specific needs. So we need to do more to actually we need to do much more consultations. We need to adapt to the way of living that postgraduates have, because their PhD students live completely separate lives to undergraduates. And I would like to empower students with tools to lobby departments over course design and contact hours specifically for postgraduate taught students, for example. And I would also like to lobby the university to provide more information to students about all elements of Lancaster life, as well as their course. So before they come here as postgraduates, for the ones that weren't undergraduates here, they're not really told about Lancaster itself, and it's kind of at their loss because they don't really know what's happening here and they don't get freshers reps like we do. So it's for them. And lastly, on governance and transparency, I'd like to reassess the efficiency of the new union system with a focus on scrutiny, accountability and the idea system. And I'd like to clarify and better explain the linkages between the union, university and the services they all provide. And lastly, I would like to also better support JCRs and the PG board, as we've seen a lot of engagement because we don't give the JCRs and PG board adequate tools so that we can put on events and everything like that. So yeah, that's a brief run through.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
So moving on to the questions, the way this debate will work is that we'll have some more general questions about the role, and then about halfway through we'll move on to manifesto specific questions. And at that point, if you would like, you can start questioning each other based on the other candidates' responses. So the first question I'd like to ask you all is that something I think you've all probably had experience with is that a lot of the time, or not a lot of the time, but sometimes the Students' Union has to make decisions that the students aren't necessarily going to be happy with. So as president, how would you, next year, how would you address situations such as this? Would you try and work within the system so that you could make an outcome which works for as many students as possible, or would you just stick to your principles in that sense and just say, I'm afraid this is the way it's going to have to be? We start with Josh.
Okay. I think it's a really difficult question or answer to theorise, because it really does depend on what's going on. If it's something where, I don't know, say the union physically does not have the money to continue some sort of service or to provide opportunities that it has done before, obviously I'd be looking at the way that things work as much as I can. If it was a priority to me and to our students, looking at prioritising it above something else that could potentially, because obviously if it was around finances, move finances from other areas to help support it, but sometimes there are things that physically cannot be done, and at that point you have to, I don't think it's about saying, no, sorry, this is happening. It's about actually working with students to make sure that they can find those opportunities or those benefits from somewhere else. If it's something from the university and they're saying, and they won't budge on a position, well, do what we do best as students and get out, make some noise. And actually, you'd be surprised how scared the university will get when students really start to show that they care about something. And even if it only starts to create a small amount of traction, a small amount of movement, really working on that and working with the other FTOs, I think is really, really important. It's not just one person going out and saying, I'm going to do this because I'm the president and that makes me the figurehead. Actually, you have to work together as a team to all see if there is a better solution that you can come to together, or how you can provide alternate routes for people to get that support or fighting the university as a team.
Siri, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, so those some really good ideas. But yeah, I also think like if there was to be a situation where students would not be benefited, that in my mind would be worst case scenario, because as a president I would really be fighting for the quality of students' lives to improve. So that would be like, so if a situation came and something happened where, you know, this quality was to decrease, I would try and come up with alternative solutions and compromises so that students would benefit in other areas, and really try and push for students not to lose out. But like, if, you know, like Josh has said, like, you know, there are tough times, and like sometimes the university won't budge on things, and sometimes like, you know, if those if that just means that the students miss out, then I think I'd be honest with it. I'd say this is what's going on. We're not happy about it as a union, and yeah, we can make some noise as well and really like campaign for change, but just to let the students know that what is going on. I think that's the main thing, and not to be trying to like cover it up and be like, oh well, you know, it wasn't our fault, you know, don't blame us. Just be like, okay, we tried to stop it from happening, but it's continued to happen, but let's try and move on from this together.
Okay, thank you very much. Rhiannon?
I think with anything that is quite a controversial topic, it's very important that we kind of try and contextualise it to students, because realistically just telling them the result without the context behind it will just cause very emotive opinions that kind of may not actually help us as a movement as well. As we see the higher education move to be more marketised, we're going to face further and harder decisions, and at the end of the day we need to take students on this journey of trying to tell them the backstory of what actually has happened. As a representative of the union, you are always going to try and fight for what is best for the students. That's without a doubt. Some people will suffer and we can't always win, but I think it's very important that when we do lose those battles, that we tell students why and what we did do and the context behind it, so that if they are then still angry, we can use that as an emotive tool, and we can use their anger to help with our campaigning, to then help build more of a portfolio and a case for when we want to challenge the university's decisions, or even for example, going back to what Josh said on that, if it's a financial one as well for the union, I think it's about us being very transparent in the sense of saying we have had to let something go, but we are very sorry for that, but we will try and find other pathways to still provide a great service, and we'll try and provide other opportunities. Maybe it's trying things that are more volunteer basis or whatever it may be, depending on what the issue is. But I think it's very important that we always just try and contextualise everything that has happened, get students on this journey with us so that they are as much motivated and a part of the campaigning, they're part of the grassroots campaigning that allow for change to happen, and it's not just from the top down us trying to create change, but listening to students' opinions and then using their energy to get us through any of the hard decisions we have to make.
Thank you very much. So moving on to the next question, is there anything, and this might be a bit close to home for some of you, but is there anything that you think the Students' Union has handled badly this year, or perhaps in Rhiannon's case while you were in charge the year before last, and how would you have handled it differently, or what have you learned from that experience? Rhiannon, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, so I'd say my one from my time of office, so during my time of office there was a huge controversy with the NUS. There's continuous controversy with NUS, but in particular there were quite a few unions that were choosing to disaffiliate with the union, and we as a union didn't actually do a referendum, whereas quite a few did. And I think if I could go back in time I would encourage more for a referendum, because as an FTO team we were very much of, we haven't had too many students say that they want a referendum, so should we throw one? But I think realistically I would have loved the opportunity, even if it wasn't for, people wouldn't have cared for the result of a disaffiliation because they weren't caring that much about it. I think it was more using it as a platform to actually inform students about the NUS, because, for example, I think a lot of people think, oh, we pay over 30,000 to be a part of the NUS, isn't that just a waste of money when we could be giving that to societies and sports clubs? It's like, well, realistically, if you look at, we pay over 30,000, but because we then get access to things like the consortium, which the Sugar House, Central Living, all those get to use, we actually save over £200,000. And it's like trying to tell students that the NUS isn't just the politics side of it. There's actually so many benefits that we don't actually get to tell students about because it's not the sexy side, I guess. But I think I wish I would have actually held a referendum just to be able to at least show the two sides of the NUS, rather than continuously it just being the playground politics that tends to be what happens and what's talked about within papers, rather than also the ways that they help us, like for example with the Sugar House as well. When we first started the case there with the building works, if you think of how much getting a solicitor in would have been, it would have been £1,000 for the hour, but we got to save so much money because through the NUS we could actually have access to solicitors and things at a reduced rate, so we got so much more coverage being able to fight that case compared to if we weren't a part of the NUS. So yeah, that's what I would have changed if I could go back in time.
Thank you very much. Josh?
It's a tough one, but I think the only real answer I can give, I mean, I talked about it in my manifesto, is around scrutiny. And I mean, we've had students come up to us and try and talk about it, and it's a really difficult one to do, because forcing someone to always be talking about what they're doing, I mean, I try as much as I can, but I'm a very face-to-face person. So I would far more happily, if that's even the right grammar, whatever, sit down and have a conversation one-to-one with someone and just say, yeah, this is what I'm up to, this is the kind of things I'm doing. And I find it quite difficult to write stuff down and still get that personal feel across without it just being, well, a robot basically typing, oh, I went to this meeting, oh, I had a chat with this person about this. So I've recently restarted doing my blog to try and increase transparency around that. We are getting close to publishing our scrutiny panel reports, despite some issues around that and getting enough people in the room together. And we've now got a date set for our AGM, or our all students meeting, or we're trying to think of some fun ways to kind of encourage people to come along, because there's going to be some really interesting debates going on there. But we've finally gotten that set for the 15th of March, so please be there. But it's, how do we get on top of that earlier? Because for pretty much the first term, when we were all in office for Michaelmas term, or whatever you want to call it, there wasn't that much coming out from the officers, because we'd all stuck our heads down. We were getting on with the things that we'd said we'd be doing, but we weren't really telling the students about that enough. And I think the best way of doing that is working together as a team, and those little reminders to each other, actually, you know what, tweet about that, or write that in your blog, or even just go out and shout about it. We have the pop-up union. It's been a great opportunity to speak to people, but a lot of the time we're not actually standing there going, look at me, this is what I've done, come and tell me what you want me to do about that to make it even better for you. So yeah, scrutiny is my one thing.
Thank you very much. Siri?
So I think like a topic that students are quite passionate about recently are the strikes that are happening. And I think that, like, I felt quite disappointed from the statement that was released by the union. It just felt a bit vague, didn't really seem to be taking a stance. It was just kind of like, yeah, we see why they're striking, and, you know, but we also agree with the students. It was just like, for me personally, I would have liked to see like some a bit more guidance, and like if I'm reading a statement by the union, I'd be there to get information and to get advice on different stances that are available, but ultimately what we as a student can, like, you know, branch under. And I think I probably would have taken a stance if, you know, doing things differently. If I was you know, in the role as president, I would have taken a stance on the strikes. even if it was to go right down the middle, to use like words such as, you know, neutral or the middle, or explicitly explain that the stance is on the fence, would be better than to just sort of say, oh, well, we kind of agree with both sides, because that's not saying anything. And I think, like, something I mentioned in my manifesto was, like, union jargon being really alienating, and, like, not many students really click with that. And, like, even me, like, I am part of the union, but, like, I don't really click with all the terms. But, like, if it was, like, explicitly explained, we're going straight down the middle, or we fully support the strikes, or we don't fully support the strikes, that would have just been so much more satisfying to see. And I think just having people's opinions public as well, because I think, like, because I'm in a position where I can just, like, go and chat to, you know, the union and ask people's positions on it. Like, that was quite interesting to hear, like, the varied positions within the union, but then those positions and those opinions should be made public for, like, student consumption, and then they can make their own decisions on that.
Yes.
So, sorry, out of curiosity then, what was your stance on the UCU?
I support strikes.
Yeah.
I do support them. I tried to honk on my way in. I think my horn's broken. So
trying to just hold the wheel through the snow is the hard bit.
I might need to get that checked, but I mimed the honk.
So moving on to a very different direction, just because we kind of kick on ahead of time. So I think you'd all agree we're currently in a big growth period at the university. We're seeing a lot of construction happening on campus, as you were mentioning in your little talk at the beginning, Josh. Obviously there's the Spine, there's the Health Innovation Campus, and there's also the UA92 campus, which is getting off the ground in Salford, isn't it? Yes.
Old Trafford.
Thank you. So how will you make sure that the needs of current students are still being met and considered, and staff, I suppose, while the university spends so much on expansion for the future and on essentially sort of recruitment tools? Siri, we'll start with you.
So I guess the main thing is to actually be going out and talking to students, and if the university is spending loads of money on these different construction projects, then where is our university missing out on that money that we could have benefited from? So that would, talking to students, it would come from, prices increasing for them. So it would be talking about the big issues that they're facing and taking them on board, and then, taking them back to university management and putting pressure on them to, keep our students in mind and make sure that they're not missing out on anything. And I think that's another big thing as well. So university management, they're in charge of all these important decisions, and I think we need to be constantly reminding them that student welfare is top priority. Our retention rates are shocking, and I think, I was at uni court, and in the whole time they were talking about retention, not once did they mention student welfare, and I thought that was just ridiculous, because surely that's just common sense that student welfare increasing would then mean students don't drop out, but that wasn't even mentioned, it wasn't brought up, like no questions were asked about it. So I think in those meetings with university management, it's about holding them to account and putting pressure on them to make sure that our students aren't missing out.
Great, thank you. Rhiannon?
I think it's quite important to note that when it comes to UA92, for example, the decision was made to ensure as well that this would not impact Lancaster University students whatsoever. This is basically looked upon as a way that the university can actually, if anything, gain money from it, rather than it being a drain on resources. And they've been incredibly delicate with, for example, the decanting of some university staff members to UA92 for them to be borrowed and things like that, and they've been very much not wanting to harm any of the Lancaster University students here on Vale Road campus. When it comes to thinking of the Health Innovation Campus, and I know as well the management school's also going under an expansion project as well, there is continuous work going on to expand what's services we have here because the university wants us to be a top 10 university. To do that, we have to have the highest facilities. But I think it's also, this is where the unions kind of, we should be a part of. So, for example, there's like the capital plan project, which is 10 years worth of where they say they're going to spend their money. And when those things are being reviewed, it's our place to say, well, we think this should be prioritised. That shouldn't be a 2023 project. That should be a 2020 project. You know, like you should be saying it for. That's the role the union plays, is challenging what the university's priorities are. And I think we do quite a good job of that currently. But there's always room for improvement in that area as well. So I'd say, yeah, we have to continue with student consultation, but I think it's more about also using statistics and backing up all the information that we have, because at the end of the day, if we just go into the university and go, students are angry about this, and that's all we say, well, they'll go, well, what evidence do you have? Back that up, because that's how they talk. And if we don't talk the way that they do, they won't do anything, they won't change. We have to know that, and I think because I already have that experience behind me, I know how it works, so I know how to implement the change, because I already know what they would expect of me if I want to implement anything, and if I want to challenge something efficiently, they would suggest me to back up my statistic, you know, back it up with evidence. So I'd say we'd always have to consult with students, but we also have to do it in a way that we can measure as well, so that we can tell them X amount of students are angry with this, and this is what their actions are going to be if they don't get X, you know, as a solution. So I think it's about being more aggressive as well with the way that we empower students and using them as grassrooters that actually help give us the tools, so that when we get to the table with the management, we tell them how it is and we have the evidence to back it up as well. So I think the university will forever try and prioritise students, but they don't always see it in the way that we do, because whenever you're in a meeting with them, they'll go, when I was in university, and you just go, when you were in university, you didn't have to pay, you know, and I think it's calling them out on things like that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Josh?
So I think Rhiannon's got a lot of it there. It's actually it's how you talk to them, but I think it's not just about numbers, it's not just this percent of students or that number of students, it's telling them how you've gotten this information, and it can be really powerful saying, I was speaking to students out, say, next to the spine, and this is the issue that they were having directly, and actually getting those students involved and empowering them, so when there are building works going on, we've got the minimum amount of disruption going on, and actually so students can continue to work and continue to thrive whilst this work is going on, because it is important for the future. And if we don't do work, and potentially, I mean, there's an argument of, are we doing too much, or someone who's looking really far into the future and is going to be arriving when all this is finished, probably want us to do more now, but kind of making sure that the work that's being done is what's necessary. And I mean, I've already talked about the spine and actually getting some of those things cut out when they're really not needed, and it's how you talk to the university, how you make it so that it's you working together and both sides can benefit from it, and it's the students and the university itself benefit, rather than just saying kind of these people will complain and you'll have angry people, or you'll have people acting in this way or that way. You make it so that it's something that works for both sides, and it's not always negatives, it's positive stories. But I think the original question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot going on.
That's fine.
But how do you make sure the priorities are still on students today?
Yes.
And honestly, it is, and going against Rhiannon quite a bit here, it is going in saying students don't like this. And so when there's smaller issues, yes, there is a big project going on where the spine is being torn apart and there's lots of work going on, but actually students still care about the fact that the water pressure in the library isn't high enough, and I've been pushing on that even this week again, because it didn't get followed up on. And so that's hopefully going to be sorted in the next week or so, fingers crossed.
Okay.
But little things like that, actually, there's lots of little things that are quite easy wins for us almost, where we go to the university, we tell them that this is an issue, and they want to work with us because they do care about students. They might not see it in the right way, and Rhiannon's definitely touched on that one, but it's kind of, it's making them see it from the way that our students are seeing it and the way that we see it, rather than it's us versus them. There's actually things where we can say, look, this works for both of us. We have happier students. And I mean, one of the things for the university is actually if you do this, the NSS score and how students are feeding back about their experiences here will be better. And they love that, obviously, because it goes into lots of metrics for them. But they do want student satisfaction to be high, and where they can work to improve the experience, so long as we're bringing these issues and not always bringing solutions, but sometimes bringing ways that things can be better for students. But it's really that language and how we work with them and not just against.
Great.
Just to go back.
Quickly.
I feel like, when you say that, going against what I said about saying using statistics, I think you're taking my comment slightly out of context there, because we're talking about in priority issues, because if it is a priority issue, there'll be a large number of students that do actually feel that way, so that's the whole point of using the statistics. I fully agree when it's small pernickety things like, pressure of tabs. Yeah, just be like, this is how students feel on a low-key one where you don't have to build it with stats, because that's a small problem, that's not exactly a priority in the big sense, if that makes sense. So I don't want to blur the lines to say, you can't just say how students feel, because our whole job is to tell them, the university, how students feel. It's just when it comes to the priority issues, if you actually do want to make an impact, you have to back it up with evidence, because that's just how they work, you know that.
But I would still argue that feelings aren't numbers.
No, they're not, but
sometimes
that's how they work.
It's explaining something and the reasons behind why students feel that way, rather than necessarily having gone out and counted every person you've spoken to around an issue. It's a balance.
No,
and it doesn't work every time either way.
I fully agree. What I'm saying is, you say the number, but you also say the reason why. That's it's not just putting a percentage. It's saying a percentage and the reason why. If that makes sense. We're both saying the same thing basically. We're both agreeing. It's just you're making it sound like I'm saying that I don't care, but I do.
No, believe me, definitely. No. It's just sometimes, completely honestly, I won't necessarily use numbers at all, just because I feel that if I can convince someone with kind of that emotional reasoning behind it better, it's judging a situation, I think, and it's a really difficult one. But sometimes, having done accounting and finance here for 3 years, and it was not a great choice for me, I can tell you I don't always prefer numbers. But that's my personal choice.
That's fine.
That's kind of how I work.
Is it okay if we move on? Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm now going to move on to some more manifesto-specific questions. At this point, you'll each have 2, and it'll go in a random order. And at this point, if you feel the need to jump in at any point to ask follow-up questions to the other candidates, please feel free to do so. We'll start with... Rhiannon, is it okay if we start with you?
Yeah, go for it.
So, in your manifesto, you spoke about wanting to build Lancaster's green reputation.
Yes.
And improving our relationship with the City Council. And I was wondering, what practical steps do you plan on making in order to achieve this?
So I'd say, reflecting back on my time in office, for example, if we're talking about the relationship with the council, we used to actually meet up with the university ward councillors every month, and we'd talk about projects that we'd want to work on, and we'd talk about issues that were happening on both ends, what they're hearing from students, what we were hearing, what campaigns would we like to prioritise. And I think it's about starting up those meetings again, so talking to the university ward councillors every month, if not more frequently when we've decided on a project, using their passion as well and their understanding and their capital within the council to then be able to build on the facilities. If we're talking about, for example, I've said lobby to create food recycling facilities, that's for on campus specifically, because that could also be incorporated with the Eco Hub, for example. So because we have that as a facility that could actually use compost, we might as well see if we can try and trial that on the university, and then if we produce more compost, there might be a way that we can actually transport it into town as well. So there's places like Cleaver Hill that could benefit from using our compost, because it just seems so strange that we don't recycle food waste. I'm from Wales, okay? We don't have 21st century trends, and I just cannot. When I came to university, I could not believe that we don't recycle food, and I think it's strange that, considering we also pride ourselves as being a green campus, and we have an eco hub that could very much use compost, it's kind of just putting two together to kind of just make sense at the time. And I think building of relationships is actually with the university ward councillors and expanding that. I'd say that I would also want to expand that to even county councillors. Like I'm friends with some various county councillors as well. I think we should expand that opportunity for the unions where you're actually sat at the table being able to offer student opinion, because sometimes the city and county kind of just go to the university, and the university's view on student consultation is having the president sat at a table. That's not student consultation, that's having one student there as a token. And I think we need to expand on that, and I think students rightfully should have more of a say, especially when we make up, roughly a fifth of the population at Lancaster as in the city. So we should have more of a say, and we should be a part of that community as well. So I think working with the ward councillors, that's the the first step, and we'll expand on that to county councillors, and then maybe even more meetings, for example, with Susan Parsonage, who's the chief exec of the council. Met with her as well during my time in office, having more regular meetings with her as well. So that's how I'd start it.
Thank you.
If I can jump in.
Please
Yeah,
do.
go for it.
So, I'm sure there's a little bit of memory which has sparked your title for this area, which is welfare and community. And you know, well, as we all do hopefully, that's one of the vice president positions.
Yeah.
So how would you work on these issues that you've highlighted under that title without kind of
Stepping on the toes of the welfare?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I'd say that last time I ran on the manifesto as well, my manifesto areas were literally the areas of each of the VPs, and if anything it brought us all together and it made us more cohesive as a team, because I had there was an area of interest that I had with each of my FTOs, and I had to work with them with it, and we worked on it collaboratively rather than me stepping on their toes. It was like, let's get together and talk about this because you're passionate about it, I'm passionate about it, and we can work together to do it. And because we're working collaboratively, we were more efficient at it as well. So I'd say because of some of the manifesto pledges that I had in the areas of other VPs, that actually made us closer as a team rather than it seeming like stepping on toes. It was very much like, let's do this together because of the approaches that we had. So I'd kind of utilise that type of tools that I used previously to be more like, let's collaborate and let's do this together. And if it's not a priority of theirs, then that's fine. We don't need to collaborate if they're not that passionate on it. But there's nothing wrong with me continuing doing that, because at the end of the day, we both just want what's best for students. So if they think at the end of the day, students have voted for you for that, so they think that's a good thing, they'll still want you to do it out for the sake of that democracy is spoken, I guess.
Okay. Siri, in your manifesto you were about wanting to improve the services offered by Students' Union Living. How will you make sure that these changes are implemented and properly carried out, is my question.
I think it would be nice for me to actually go through with the people who would actually be carrying out the checks, and have a meeting with them and making sure that all the boxes are being ticked. So all our bases are covered basically, and we're not missing out, anything. Because I think there have just been so many varied complaints from people who have used the living services that you can't just bracket it under one thing. So you have to be doing a checklist and making sure everything is checked. So having resources a checklist to go through everything, make sure that it's got everything there. Talking to the landlords as well, making sure they're they're committed to their role as being part of our services. I think that's the main thing, but I think I would like to be personally involved in it, just to make sure that it's being carried out and being done.
Thank you very much. Anyone else jump in?
I'd probably just say that it already happens.
Yeah.
That would be my only point, is the fact that they do have checklists and they do have to go through it, and they're also part of Bellevue Homes as well, who do more thorough checks as well on the landlords, because I think you said about insufficient checks on the landlords that they have in properties. I'd say my only plan would be that it does happen, but it doesn't mean that there's not areas that could not improve, if that makes sense.
I just think what I was just saying, that it probably happens. I think it would just be a way of improving what is already available, and making sure that the checklist isn't just there in name only, but it's actually being carried forward and actually being implemented properly. That's a big thing, because we have checklists, but people are still coming into houses on moving day, not having a double bed, not having a table. People have had birds' nests living in their air vents, rats in their walls. Like, these are things that, it shouldn't be happening. And these are our services, and we can take control of that. And if we do have those checklists, it's being more strict with them and like really pushing them.
Okay, thank you very much. Josh, you wrote in your manifesto about wanting to reduce bus pass prices for students. Yes?
Hopefully not quite. So it's
Not
fighting
quite, yes,
against any
sorry.
increases.
Fighting
So
against
we've
increases.
recently seen, it was actually on Overheard at Lancaster, a couple of weeks ago now, that the ticket prices, so individual
Yes.
tickets, and I think it was uni day
Mm.
riders as well, were going up.
Mhm.
And let's be honest, that's basically a hint that the
Yeah.
bus pass prices are going to be going up as well.
Okay.
And so it's around that, and
That's fine. This still
Sorry,
this
do you wanna
follows on.
finish your
This
question?
follows on. This question is still valid in that case, and I haven't completely misread your manifesto. That's fine. So, considering that Stagecoach is of course a private company, how is the union going to apply pressure onto them effectively? And also, why should a private company listen to you?
because as a union we represent 13,500 students. I couldn't tell you how many bus passes it actually is, but I believe it's around 3,500 each year. Sorry, I still can't shake this cough. I think it's gone around the room a little bit.
Glad I sat here now.
Yeah, so it's basically reminding them that as students we are a large part of their business. There's a really good reason that they run there's the 2A, actually no, they've changed them now, haven't they?
U,
Whatever
all that
numbers
stuff,
they've
yeah.
given them, all the U ones, all run to the university. And okay, some of it is obviously for the staff members as well, but a lot of it is for the students here, and working with them and really pushing that need that students can't just keep facing rising costs, because something will break eventually. And potentially, in the case of Stagecoach, that will just mean that less students are buying bus passes and more are cycling or walking. And okay, I massively encourage you to do that. It's green, it's great for your health, all that kind of thing. It's really nice to get out in the morning and go for a stroll. But when students need to be able to get on the bus and they're having to make a choice between a really long walk and actually a bus pass that they can't afford, or having to get a termly one that is more expensive in the long run, we really need to be pushing Stagecoach on that and reminding them that they're not only there for kind of making profit, but they're also here to provide a service, and it needs to be a good quality service.
Maybe I want to jump in. Yeah.
Well, just to me, I feel like you didn't quite answer how will you do it, because realistically, Stagecoach have a monopoly on us. There is no other bus company that students could use. So
And it is nationwide.
And it's nationwide. So unless you said to students, boycott, we'll just give you all bikes, what tools are you going to use? That's what I'm like. Do you get what I mean? Like,
No,
I feel like
I understand.
I understand what you said. It was more the fact that I feel like you
Actually,
didn't. How would you do
convince
it?
them?
Yeah.
I think it's around working with the university quite a bit, actually, because they do utilise it in some of their staff benefits that they provide, in terms of they reduce prices because obviously staff do pay a lot more than the current student rates, so they help provide some cheaper rates for some of their staff who are on lower wages. Working with them and actually saying, look, now we're an even bigger stakeholder, but it's a really tough one. It's not a guaranteed solution, to be honest, and it kind of falls to what happens on the day when you're in that meeting and where they're willing to move, whether it's kind of increasing the number of buses that are happening at peak times and reducing them at off-peak times, to make sure that students are actually getting that value for money at the same time, even if there really has to be an increase, and making sure that's as small as possible, where we can maximise the I'm trying to not get into businessy words, you can tell I was part of LUMS, but maximising utilisation, so making sure that when there is a bus running, it's got the most students in it, or the most people in it, so that they're getting the most use out of the service they're putting on. But so are students, and whenever there needs to be a bus on, there is one available to me.
Okay.
Does that help? I know it's not perfect, but it's
Yeah. So just to make you work with the university and just look at the efficiency of the buses.
and
Okay.
see what solutions we can help to provide and how we can be flexible with the service and to make it better for the same kind of cost to
Yeah.
them.
I think it's another point as well is like kind of looking at the offers that they do offer as bus passes as well. For example, for postgraduate taught students, they'll have like these things called block teaching. So it's where so 1 week of the month they have to come to university, so they don't need a bus pass bar from 1 week, and there's not really any alternative out there. So why can't we diversify the types of offers that the Stagecoach provide as well? Because they'll still make a profit on it, because they'll have people buying the bus passes rather than either cycling, even though realistically we should promote cycling because it is more important to be green, but we just don't try and accommodate for postgraduates. Like this is another example, we just fail them, where we just don't think of realistically postgraduates live a separate life to us, so we need to look at the type of problems they'll also face with bus passes as well.
Thank you. Siri, coming back to you, just because this question follows on in a similar vein to the last one. You've also said in your manifesto you'd like to put, and you've used the word pressure again, on the university to fight against increase in parking fees, bus fees, accommodation fees. What does this pressure actively look like to you? How can it be used effectively?
So I think it would be a difference in the way we handle our relationship with uni management. That's a big thing for me. So I think it would be talking to them in their language if needs be, like throwing statistics at them, but also reminding them of the students, because like a big thing like at university with University Court was that like student welfare and just students in general weren't even mentioned like at all until the Students' Union started speaking. And like I think Josh, you gave like 4 points on like things you like requests like for university management to like give to the Students' Union, and like as nice as they were, I just feel like we can do more than that. We can like ask for more than just, you know, like a promise for commitment to mental health, or like you know like a promise that, you know, they'll care about student welfare. It's more about giving these problems to them and saying, how will you improve student welfare and how will you put these funds into our mental health services? So not just being like, yeah, things are great, you know, like in like an ideal world that would be great and we'd have like a, you know, best friend relationship or something like that. But I think it's about that pressure. I see that as just, you know, being honest if we have to be honest, and being like forceful if we have to be forceful, and putting our foot down and saying, well, that's not okay actually. And if they say something that, you know, isn't great for students, holding them to account. Like, I'm part of student media, I know all about this. Like, you know, it's about telling them that things aren't okay. Like, you know, they have to be told that students aren't happy about that, and like using the voice of the students as one in the union and like taking that to them.
I think my question would be like, what do you perceive the current relationship to actually be between the FTOs and the management? Because I'd say, for example, during my time in office, I was one of the university staff members said, I've always viewed the union as a critical friend, whereas you're there to call us out on these type of decisions and always tell us about students. So it sounds like the type of relationship you're wanting is the one that we kind of had. So how would you like to change it? Because it's just because like what you described is genuinely like that's what we did. If that makes sense. I don't if that comes across right.
I mean, I think it does. It's just I've not seen that. Like at University Court, like I didn't really see like it more as a critical friend. It was just more like we were on the same sort of like level with them, and I thought that was just a bit odd, really. Like it took me by surprise that it was like that in the first place. Like, you know, we got to have our own presentation as a students' union, like that was great, but then like it was just like it just felt too friendly. Like that was the main thing. Like it was just, it wasn't critical enough, I think. And like I'm not sure how it was in the past, but like I've like heard it's always been like that, so I don't know.
So I think as a kind of a follow-on point to that, in a public meeting there where we called on the Vice-Chancellor to commit to stuff, and we called on him to commit to prioritising mental health support, and he couldn't even do that in the room because he doesn't have the numbers available. And it's actually, in that kind of a situation, it's really difficult. And so I think it's, when you're giving someone that chance to respond live, it can be really difficult, and you actually need to be a little bit more careful about how hard you put your foot down. And then it's in the things that follow. So the Vice-Chancellor is organising meetings between Laura, our VP Cams and Comms, who's really taking the mental health stride forward, with university management, and that's ongoing, and that's where we put our foot down. That's where you strike hard, because you have to start gradually, and then when you have that opportunity, when you have that little bit of a hole started, you've got that grip on it, then you bite down, you don't let go.
I'd say the fatal pounds, like the fatal hits, are done in the meetings that aren't in public, because if we grandstand, it ruins the relationship completely to the point where they will not want to work with us, and they do kind of have us on a bit of a leash, if I'm honest, because at the end of the day we do financially depend on them to an extent, and also if we have no relationship, we'll never get them right. They'll never be.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a relationship with them, or no relationship at all. It's just having a more critical one and more formal. I mean, maybe it's been like that in the past. I don't know. I've only been here 2 years. I don't know. Maybe it has been like that in the past, but it's about bringing that back. And I think, in a public place, it probably is better just to say the broader aspects of it. But I think the fact that we said we should be able to still hold you to account, and then the Vice-Chancellor was like, I don't know what you mean by that. It's how do you not know what that means? That is the one thing we should be doing, and if he doesn't know that we're there to do that, then
I think the points, if anything, we were trying to reassure you that is what we have always strived for, because there's been situations where as you said during explaining your manifesto, you're a woman of colour and you're really passionate about that. I remember one of my first university councils, I was sat down and we were talking about Brexit and trying to push the fact that we're a diverse culture and we're a global experience, and I just sat down and went, just to point out, we're a room full of white people, mostly men, and the looks, if looks could kill, I was dead that moment, because I was so willing to be critical in that moment, because if we want to push out messages about, for example, being a global university, that should be throughout. It's not just tokenistic, it should be embodied within our governance and the people that make these decisions. So I think, if anything, we were just trying to reassure you that that's always what we've tried to strive for, and we fully encourage what you're saying, because that's what we'd want to see in a president as well.
Rhiannon, to move on to the second question. You pointed out in your manifesto that 35% of Lancaster University students have struggled with mental health problems, which is a frighteningly high statistic, I think we can all agree. And one thing you said is that you'd like to improve signposting to your support facilities. But what other measures or initiatives do you think are necessary to improve on this statistic?
Well, I think, so I have a biomedical background. Biomedical background, coughs. I always come from a background I believe prevention is so much better than treatment, and I feel if, for example, under one of my wealth and community topics, it's talking about actually some workshops that we could provide as well. So it's kind of helping students work, dealing with work-life balance. It's giving them workshops to deal with exam stress and assignments, getting them even trying to figure out sleeping patterns. I think I'm still trying to figure out mine as a third year. Do you know what I mean? And it's doing a lot of things where it's about prevention. I think it's still continuing to bang the drum to the university. I think for years we will probably still have to bang the drum on the fact that you are underfunding welfare services to the point that it's actually ridiculous. And I think whoever is elected out of any of us will want to push for that. And I think it's all of us wanting to lobby for more support for the counselling services, and I know that will appear on many people's manifestos because it's important to students, and I think it's about continuously banging that drum and just finding new ways to bring that to the table and backing it up with statistics, because I think if anything that has been where we have fallen. I know I keep on mentioning statistics, but it's because that's where we have always fallen short as a union, because you have new people coming into office. It takes you about 6 months to actually understand your role fully. By the time you get into the swing of things, it's almost time to go. But like being able to hit the ground running from the start, knowing how the university works, so I could actually put together papers that is like, let's put welfare at the top, let's make that priority. And I think using my old experience to do that, and also just using more to do with prevention, putting on workshops for students as well, so that they don't have to go to the counselling services. And also I think doing more to promote some of the services that we do currently have, such as Nightline, for example. I think it's such a key service that we do have that is actually run by students, which is incredible. It's an amazing volunteering opportunity, and I think we don't even advertise even those quite enough, or maybe even fund them enough. I'm not too sure what the finances have been this year, but I think it's kind of looking at various different ways to treat the welfare issue, rather than just thinking of lobbying for counselling. It's prevention also. Yes, let's work on treatment, and let's look at other pathways, and also clear up where you go to for help, because I know so many students that will be like, oh, I need financial help. They'll go to their college will go like, oh, go to the union will go, oh, we don't do financing, they'll go to the base, and it's like, I just have this issue that needs solving now. I don't need to bounce between these people. So I think signposting is such a key thing at the moment as well.
Then jump in?
Yeah, so just like picking up on, you said like it takes about 6 months to like hit the ground running. I was like, what is that phrase? I just want to like clarify, like I think ultimately that falls into the responsibility of the handover between like previous presidents and like newer presidents, just because new presidents shouldn't be at a disadvantage just because they haven't been in an FTO role before. Like it shouldn't be a requirement, like, you know, to run for an FTO role if you have already been in that role before, like, because I think that puts people off running as well, because like they feel like, oh well, I've never done it before, like this is so new to me, like, you know, and then they're too scared to even like put themselves out there. So like, yeah, just to like highlight, like how would you make that better, handovers better or something?
Well, I was going to say, realistically, this is the first election for a while that you've even had people re-running for the position. So if anything, I don't think candidates are put off by being first-time runners. You are a first-time runner yourself, and I don't think that would have put you off. Do you know what I mean? So I'd say handover is important, but no matter how good your handover is, it will not teach you what you need to learn, because the type of thing you need to learn is how people operate as humans, what relationship you'll have with those people, and it's about establishing them rapport, and that's to the individual. Like, I'm genuinely not trying to say that you're at a disadvantage here because you bring a fresh insight that me and Josh couldn't bring. Do you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't feel disadvantaged as a candidate. I'm just saying one big thing, like for me, is saying that realistically I don't have to do that learning curve, because I can reflect on my experience and be able to be, know what I'm doing from day one, whereas you will have to do your induction period, and that's not a bad thing because you're bringing fresh eyes to things. And I think it's important to know that, like, no matter how good your handover will be, there'll still be things that you'll need to learn, especially as well as a woman of colour. You will be treated differently. I was treated differently because I was a woman. Like, no, like, you could have been given a Bible, like, you could have been given, like, from, like, 100 pages of how to be president.
But, like, it's learning on the job, I get that. I think it's just to clarify that, like,
but I think I would agree, because one of the things you said is how you take that paper and how you draw up that document that works, and I think you'll never get that perfect in a handover, but it really is about making sure that all the important things, all the things that are going on at the moment, there's loads of stuff. The university is always looking to, I don't know, build another campus in Manchester or something, and making sure that that kind of information is really handed over. So you're not walking into a room not knowing what's being talked about and not knowing who's talking. It's giving you the best advantage that you can get, and that's one of the things I'm really keen. I've been saying it to pretty much everyone who asks, kind of like, how are you going to campaign? And I've said, I've got to campaign nicely, because whoever wins, like, I've got to have fun for the next week and a bit. I mean, why not? But also, I have to work with both of these women, and potentially one of them will be the person that I have to hand over to, and I want that handover to be as powerful and as full, I guess is the right word,
Yeah.
as it possibly can be.
Yeah, as
Yeah.
efficient, yeah.
Because there is so much to hand over.
Yeah.
There really, really is, and kind of writing stuff up if there needs to be that 100-page Bible, if it needs to be there, writing that up. But that one-to-one time is how I work personally, and working with whoever does get it, if it isn't me, to make sure that's really powerful. Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
say
because
that's
I think like learning on the job is definitely like it's part and parcel of any job. But I think, like you said, good handover sets you in the right stead.
Great. Thank you. And Josh, this final question is actually more to do with something which isn't on your manifesto rather than something that is. Because as I was preparing these debates, because I'm a first year, I know that at the time I knew very little about how the union works, so I decided to watch last year's presidential debate. And something you mentioned in that debate was improving parking facilities for students who drive. And in my first couple of terms on uni, having spoken to a lot of people who are in third year or postgraduate students, a lot of students that do try to campus have been feeling that with the construction of Health Innovation Campus and all the other construction going on, and with an increase in parking fees, that it's actually got slightly worse. And I was wondering, is the improvement in parking facilities still something you're hoping to achieve, or is that something that is that essentially what happened in that respect?
So actually so I started on a Monday, and the following Monday I sat down with, as we just said, a bunch of people I didn't know, and a load of things coming up that I didn't really know about, because basically I was doing my induction. I hadn't really had time to properly get down and read through all the documents properly. And one of the things that came up was the student parking permit. And this isn't something that necessarily gets talked about that much, because it was quite difficult to shout about.
Yes.
And it's the beginning of the summer and no one really cares about it. Cares about uni, they're out enjoying themselves. But actually the parking permit for students who are able to park on central campus was going to be set at £170. And that's the same as what staff are charged to park everywhere. Students would just be allowed at South West campus around Alex Park. And actually that's an opportunity where in a closed room you really do put your foot down. And I would not let the conversation carry on until the university had recognised that was wrong. And actually we got it reduced, and it's now at, I can never remember which way around it is, so you'll have to excuse me for that, but it's either £136 or £134. And I know that's nothing like getting a free permit for the whole year, and it could be cheaper. But
Is that for the whole year?
That is for a whole year, 130, let's call it 6, let's be a little bit pessimistic, to park as a student. And unfortunately the £3, so the increase from £1 to £3 was something that had already been discussed, and the university were able to basically say to me, no, we've had this consultation with the previous year's FTOs, and it's been given the okay. In fact, it was encouraged as a method around green and encouraging students not to drive. And so there was basically nothing I could do about that, and we've tried to campaign publicly outside of, because if something works in the room and that discussion works, brilliant, but if it doesn't, try and bring it outside the room. We've tried to have those conversations, and I am working to improve how we alleviate some of the pressures on parking around campus, make it easier for students, but it is a really, really uphill battle, just because of some of the things and some of the measures that have been put into place. And obviously it's conflict inside me as well, because I do want to encourage green students and students to act in green ways, but yeah, I'm really fighting to see how we can work around these issues that kind of hit me and there's nothing I can do, how we get to the other things and how we make it better for students in other ways.
Okay, anyone like to jump in?
No, I think going back on you saying it was the previous FTO teams, I'd just like to say was not me, because I don't think it was a.
It will have been through, and this is the jargony bit,
Yeah.
a meeting called Cement Transport, where the president and the VP Welfare and Community sit. And that's actually one I was in today. So, hence I'm in a bit of a green mood today.
Just trying to think. I was just thinking back on you saying that it tripled, and I was just checking. Because I knew it would have been cement, but I definitely was not there, so it would have been in my absence, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would have probably. To be fair, it's a hard call, isn't it? Whether it's a price increase or or on the premise of people being green, because I can imagine my VP welfare was very green orientated, and if that was the way that he decided it, then the way he decided it, I guess that shows the difference between how the political direction of an FTO team can differ, because it depends what your priorities, because that will have been your priorities for the following year, but the year before that none of us mentioned parking, because we kind of, as an area, you're like, if we don't talk about car parking, we usually don't bring it up and we don't change much. So that's like the hard thing. Once you start talking about it, they start changing the area in a way that you don't want it to change.
So just about ran out of time here, but we've got one question which I think is come up a couple of times, which I think would be quite interesting, that's come in on our online form. So we've invited students to submit some questions on our online form, and the question has come from, I think, an anonymous source. Yes. Which
Spooky.
is spooky, yes. Can a students' union president get enough done in 1 year?
That is quite a vague question.
What
Get
is
enough done.
That's what
yeah.
it says. Yeah, I mean, do you think I guess Josh and Rhiannon, in your time as president, did you feel like you've done sufficient amount? Like, did you feel like you've done enough to the role, or do you feel like it's just not enough time to implement enough changes that you want?
Well, realistically, neither of us would be rerunning if we didn't feel like we'd done enough in our first time. Like, you might have a different opinion, but I always just felt like I wanted to rerun, because now knowing what I do, I could do so much more change, in the sense that I could complete my own manifesto and help other FTOs complete theirs, because I had the knowledge of how to do it. So that's why I'm rerunning, because I want it to be like, in most unions across the country, you have people run for a VP role and then run for president, and that's just normal, and they think it's really strange when we say that. We're genuinely, I'm not trying to, like, I feel bad saying it, but like, one of the reasons why I reran was because all of the unions have people that were VPs that then become presidents, and I wanted to be able to give Lancaster a president who did have experience and that can like hit the ground running from day one. And like, that's why I wanted to do it, and because realistically student politics is the only thing I've done with my life since being in uni, more so than my degree to an extent. So I'd say I couldn't do enough in my first year, but that's why I know I want to do it again, because I could do so much more.
So Siri, how do you think you could hit the ground running as best as you could?
Yeah, so I'm trying not to be in...
No, but like, I was just thinking that, like, if, like, I had a solid handover, like, that filled me in on everything that had happened that when I wasn't there, and being, like, the person I am, having the skills that I do, I really think I could just hit the ground running, because I know the kind of person I am, and I don't do things, I don't know what, in a...
Half-heartedly?
Half-heartedly,
there we go.
The
TV-friendly version of what I was trying to say, in a half-hearted way. And I know that, like, I would throw myself into it from day one, and I have a list of what I want to achieve, and I think by the end of it I would achieve that.
Okay, great. Well, I think we'll wrap up there, if that's all right with everyone. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining us as well here in the studio. If you'd like to see these guys back in action, as it were, Monday, 6 p.m. in Cartmel College, in Parkhouse Farm. You can see the hustings, all of our candidates from all of our positions being filled will be going up against each other, answering your questions. So please make sure you get along to that. Thank you very much for tuning in. I've been Alex George. We only have one more debate left, which is the Vice President in Education role coming up, which will be beginning hopefully as quick as possible, because unfortunately we've overrun slightly, as is the case in student media, I suppose.
Yeah.
But thank you again, and see you soon.